Yeah, so as people know, this evening's episode is on bad science, and we'll talk a bit about what that might mean, because I think it can mean different things to different people. We were just having a really brief chat, Rob and I. How long have we known each other now, Rob? 12, 13 years?
Something like that. I started on Pod Arena at 2006.
Yeah, so that's 12 years ago. It must be sometime around there. And I remember one of the first discussions we had face to face was about Ben Goldacre, because we were both big fans at the time. He was writing his column for the newspaper at the time, and then obviously we both read his book, which is called Bad Science. And for those who haven't read it, absolutely worth a read.
Definitely.
And that's kind of the vague topic we're going to just, we haven't massively planned, but we're going to talk around. And obviously Rob talks about this quite a bit, in lectures that he gives. So, we're looking to cover things like why we should be applying scientific level of thinking, and not forgetting what the SC in our BSc stands for, obviously. Logical fallacies that we're all guilty of, errors in thinking, science v pseudoscience, and how this applies to us as humans, but mostly as clinicians as well. So let's just kick off with bad science, Rob. So, as we've said before, this can mean different things. What would you class as bad science? Is it someone who completely ignores science, does what they want and what feels right, or what they've always done because it works? Is it someone who doesn't ignore science, but they cherry pick and they use their confirmation bias, and they just find things to support their position, and they ignore the things that potentially refute it? Is it the people that dive into the literature in earnest, but actually misinterpret it, or don't understand it, or just read the abstract, or is it a bit of a combination of everything?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. The thing that really got me started on this was when I had one of those road to Damascus moments where I realized how irrational I was. I started reading a few books around it, and you look at all these fallacies and you suddenly say, oh my God, I can actually think of a time when I've done that. I can see that in myself. And then you start looking at science, and science for me is our best effort to overcome our baser selves. We are fundamentally slightly more evolved monkeys. Some of us slightly better evolved than others, but we won't go into Arsenal fans here. And science is our best effort to overcome that, to actually become more than just the base creatures. So that's good science. Bad science is when we do it wrong or do it badly. The absence of it is dangerous. Those people who just abandon any kind of hope or pretense at science, they're bad enough, and God knows there's enough of them around. But there's also the ones who do it, but do it badly and think they're doing it well, and they're more dangerous because that gives it a sort of patina, a sheen of legitimacy that it doesn't deserve. And as you say, there's lots of different flavors of that, and there's lots of errors that we make, and I'm sure we all make them.
Yeah, a key thing I think you said then, Robert, right at the start of that, was that critical self-reflection. Because that's exactly how I end up going down the exact same pathway. That you once you understand these thought processes, you suddenly see what you were doing wrong yourself, and maybe that distinguishes those who say follow the science versus those who follow the pseudoscience. Yeah, that we're all biased. It's fundamental to the human condition. It cannot be avoided. We're hardwired for that, yeah.
Some of us are aware of our biases, and some of us try to overcome them, and some of us do not.
Now, Bruce has just commented, Robert, that he's glad that you got dressed up for tonight's podcast.
This is a clean vest, guys. I mean, no putting under the arms or anything.
A better comment was that. Someone said, James said, you look like you're ready to play Call of Duty online.
Much further.
So where do we start then? Shall we talk about the people who are sort of, you don't want to pick on groups of people. Let's talk first about the people who the people that just don't engage with science because they do something, it works. Why, if something works, and you know, let's put it into our world. If we're seeing a patient, an individual, and we're intervening with some sort of tool or modality, and it works, and we'll talk about what that means.
Yeah.
Why question it? Why critique it? Why stop doing it in the face of conflicting evidence? Let's talk about that individual, that group of individuals.
Whoops, Robert's frozen.
I thought he was being really thoughtful then. I thought he was really taking his time to think about it.
Just have to wait a moment for him to. Can you hear a whole lot of car horns beeping where you are?
No, is that you?
That's okay. Yeah, I can hear a whole lot of police sirens outside the hotel, but at least it's not being picked up. Let me just message Robert privately. Actually, what I might do.
He might just still be thinking.
Yeah. Look, hang on, I'm just coming up with something. Yeah, he's logged off. He's got to log back in. Look, while we're waiting for him, I might just put this up. What we were just about to start talking about was some of this difference between science and pseudoscience. And I think the sort of person that Ian's probably referring to is those who say sort of promoting a pet theory, agenda or something, start with a conclusion, then work backwards to confirm it. Hostile to criticism, i.e. they lash out at criticism rather than embracing it and trying to engage with it. Uses vague jargon to confuse and evade, grandiose claims that go beyond the evidence, cherry picks only what's favourable for the evidence, relying on testimonials or weak evidence, and uses flawed methods with unrepeatable results. And the bottom one there, dogmatic and unyielding. And I think that's the sort of person that I think we all come across quite regularly in social media, not just within podiatry, within in so many topics that I know I'm involved in. So I'm talking and also trying to monitor what's happening with Robert. So just, yeah, let's.
It's normally my internet that lets us down with these kind of things, rather than the guests, isn't it?
Yeah. So let me try and get hold of Robert separately. It's just sorry everyone who's hanging on for what's going on. We're just getting no.
I just asked an incredibly intelligent and profound question, and we've left everyone hanging. Oh, here you go. He's just messaged saying that he's.
Oh, he's just resetting things. Yeah, I got the message. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. We'll give him a second to come on and answer then, right? And we won't go ahead because we've got a few bits to talk through, but I'm sure he'd want to have his say on them.
Yeah, in case anyone's wondering where I am, I'm in a hotel room in Naples, and if you hear any horns and sirens, it's because there's a whole lot of police cars out my window here for the Italian conference. I think you're off to a conference tomorrow too, Ian.
Yeah, I'm flying to Belfast at 7 AM. For the All Ireland Conference, which starts on Friday, but it's the conference is golf tournaments tomorrow. Conference is in Armagh. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I'm sure Sean Savage will call me on it if I haven't, if he's watching still. So yeah, that's tomorrow. That's why we're doing this on Wednesday this week.
Yes, Robert's back. Okay, Robert, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry about that. I don't know.
No, that's okay. Look, why you weren't there, I just ran through that science versus pseudoscience to describe the characteristics on the pseudoscience side.
Yeah.
So perhaps, Ian, you want to ask that question again that you started with?
Sorry about that.
Where did you lose me, Rob? I worded it beautifully, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but yeah.
It'll never be the same again. You'll never repeat.
No. Terrible. I've lost my moment. Let's talk about the individual, the group of individuals who practice in a certain way. They get good clinical outcomes.
I remember. Why should we question it if it works?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why would they embrace conflicting evidence if they know it works?
Something I'll start with there is why people don't embrace conflicting evidence. The big problem is that to actually be a critical thinker, to be a skeptic, is personally self-destructive. It is harmful to your bank balance, to put it in a short way. If you think a patient walks in to see you and they say, I've come to you for orthotics because I've got headaches, and I've heard that orthotics cure headaches. Now, you've got two roads you can go down here. You can go down, yeah, sometimes orthotics cure headaches. We'll give them a try and orthotics will cure your headaches. Or you can go down the road of, well, headaches are a complex multifactorial condition. First of all, we don't know what type of a headache it is. It could be a migraine headache or a neuralgia headache or a tension headache or something else entirely. And I'm not an expert in neurology, so I don't understand that. And I don't know about all the other causal factors. It could be your eyes, it could be your diet. There's 101 things it could be. I'm not an expert in this area, but we'll have a shot. Can I have £400 for a pair of orthotics, please? One of those is going to be very appealing to patients, and one of them is not. So one of the reasons that a lot of people don't look critically at these things is because it's uncomfortable. It's not nice. We want to be able to give patients the obvious, easy answers. And the complex reality is hard. Nobody forms a line behind the door marked inconvenient truth. We all want the easy answers. So that's why people don't embrace science. Why people do is because it's important. Science is a reflection of reality. It's our best effort to find out the truth. People get better for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the psychosocial aspect of it, the placebo aspect of it, which is not to be underestimated, but also not to be overestimated or represented as something that it isn't. If we didn't make an effort to find out these things, we'd still be bleeding people and using leeches and trepanning them to get rid of the evil humours.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned there, which immediately comes to my mind, is that sort of post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, where we do something happens. So we whatever we do, it doesn't matter what we do. I won't pick on anything in particular. You intervene. The patient reports, "I'm better," and then in your mind, and it's like that caused that. That must be as a result of that. And that's a challenge. You got to challenge yourself regarding that, and that's not comfortable. And you got to challenge your thought process. You get that cognitive dissonance that we've all been through. All three of us have been through it, and many people. And do you think it's as simple as some people just not willing to go to that dark, uncomfortable place? Do you think it's that simple? Not
willing to, and not wanting to, because it's not a nice place. The nice thing to believe is that we've helped them, because we all went into medicine because we want to help people. So it's much nicer to say, yes, I helped that person, than to say that person was getting better anyway. They regressed to the mean, and I just wasted £400 of their money on a pair of orthotics that they never needed.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that. You can look deeper into it than that. But at the fundamental level, that's what it is. We want to believe nice things. We want to believe things that make us happy. Yeah. We don't have any interest. We don't have any bias towards believing things that make us unhappy.
And I think in many ways that group of individuals, not defending that practice or that behaviour at all, because I don't think it's right, but in many ways they're far less sinister than the second group of people that we want to talk about. And these are the people that essentially use it quite aggressively to their own means. So people that you can have someone in a practice somewhere who's doing something that's got no evidence behind it, but they find it works, and that goes on, and that's one thing. But then you've got the person that sets up a website, puts a 4-figure price tag to something, market themselves as an expert, as a guru. It feels to me like a much more sinister. You could argue it's the same approach. There's two different types there, and I think the second person's worth singling out and talking about a bit as well.
Yeah, and that's always the question, isn't it? When people peddle something which is self-evidently woo, self-evidently placebo, non-effective, do they believe in it themselves? Do psychics and mediums believe that they're talking to the dead, or do they know that they're just channeling their own desire to fleece the punters?
The last one.
I suspect, as always, the truth is that there's some in either camp. There are, without a doubt, those who misrepresent research, misrepresent or ignore research, or post stuff out for their own financial gain, knowing that it's bullshit. I'm quite sure they have bullshit. I'm quite sure that they have rationalizations for it. but to be perfectly honest, I'm not that interested in them. The fact is, some things are true and some things are not true. And we've kind of lost sight of that, I think, as not just as a profession, not just in medicine, but as a society. Something I did take a note. I took one note for this evening. The Oxford English Dictionary has a word of the year every year. Or actually 2 years ago, it was an emoji, believe it or not. Belinda would love that. 2016, the word of the year was post-truth, hyphenated. Post-truth has an entry in the Oxford Dictionary as a distinct thing. It is a word in its own right. And what it means, I wrote it down so I can get it right. Post-truth, relating to denoting circumstances where objective facts are less influential than appeals to emotion or personal belief. And this for me is a really sinister bit. It's not, this is true, no, this isn't true. We can argue about that. Oh, there you go. We've disagreed on stuff. I've disagreed with you, Ian. I've disagreed with you, Craig. That's something that we can do. But we agree that there is an objective reality. We agree that there is a truth that we are disagreeing about. We disagree what it is, but we agree that it exists. The really sinister thing for me is when people go down the route of, well, there is no truth. There is no answer. It's just what you want to believe. And you see it in all its sinister glory when people are presented with evidence that counteracts their belief and say, well, I don't care. It doesn't matter. The fact is, I like it. My patients like it. Your patients will like it. Your patients will want to pay you lots of money. That's the bit that will ultimately drive us to Armageddon. It's where we no longer respect the concept of truth, never mind it's what it is. It's kind of like we're all in the same boat. We can disagree on where the boat goes, but when you start knocking holes in the bottom of the boat, then we're all screwed. Does screwed count?
yeah. Pay up.
I'm going to say 50p. So I'm going to say that.
Sorry, Craig, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, look, just on that, Robert, they might say that, but my patients like it, that kind of stuff. That doesn't take into account the legal and ethical obligations that we're all required for our licenses, that we have to practice that way. And if you don't, you can use your license. And I know in several of these episodes previously, I've alluded to the fact that here in Australia, we've got 2 general medical practitioners whose licenses were taken away to practice over some non-science views they expressed. They weren't putting patients, these weren't patient complaints, these were expressing non-science views. And I know in Australia, we're subject to the same sort of ethics and regulations that they are in that regard. So it's not as though they have a choice. If you want to stay licensed, you're putting your license to practice at risk with that attitude. And that's,
as it should be, because as Ian said, our degrees say Bachelor of Science.
Oh yeah,
it's not Bachelor of Wishful Thinking. There's a lot to be said for placebos. Sometimes a placebo is the best thing. Sometimes alternative medicine is the best thing. Or if you have an alternative pathology, alternative medicine is the correct solution, because it'll keep you happy whilst you're getting better by yourself.
Yeah, I like the term. I think Steve Novella came up with it, or David Gorski came up with the theatrical placebo.
Yeah,
and it's the theatre of what is done is why they get better.
Absolutely. And it's a mechanism. Another name for it is it's psychotherapy. I mean, if you change somebody's mindset by something you do and they improve, that's a win. That's a gain. Crucial thing though is that you have to know that that's what you're doing. If you do that on purpose, if you give someone a placebo knowing you're giving them a placebo, that's one thing. If you give them a placebo representing that you're giving them something else, that's a very different thing.
Yeah, no.
There's a good example here. I shouldn't cross over into dermatology because it's not my area, but I know somebody.
Belinda's not watching. So.
Oh, okay. Happy days. I know somebody that uses tea tree TT50. It's a tea tree oil cream for verrucas. It has no clinical basis for it working whatsoever. But all the time the parents are doing that, they're putting a smelly cream that they think is going to help, and they're not blowing holes in their kid's foot with salicylic acid. If you go into it knowing that that's what you're doing, then that's fine. And as long as you don't actually lie to your patients, that's fine. But the problem is when we don't care anymore, when we think that, you know, we don't care how it works. If our patients are happy, then we can say what we like. That's the problem. That's what will drive not only the profession, that will drive society into the ground. I know Bruce was watching earlier. America is suffering at the moment from this in spades. 50% of Americans believe that the Earth is less than 6,000 years old, that human beings evolved in their current state, and that 2 penguins got off the ark at Mount Ararat and waddled down to Antarctica, and the kangaroos jumped to Australia. 50%. Now that's going to start having an effect. That's going to start damaging society. I think we're seeing that. We can disagree on what the truth is, but we've got to respect the concept that it does exist.
Yeah, Bruce is still listening and he's still taking digs at you.
God bless him.
Yeah, so
he likes the word. He likes the word. I think he's disappointed we haven't said the word fake news yet, so he's just said it himself in the comments. Coming back to those 2 groups of people that are practicing similarly, but one feels sinister and one doesn't.
Yeah.
The way I've always sort of managed to work out which one's which is how they respond when challenged. So, you know, a completely, utterly acceptable thing to do in this day and age is to challenge things.
Yes.
We all 3 of us have discussed and argued over the last decade, and some of the best sort of arguments are often between 2 friends. It's completely okay to argue with someone and like them afterwards, despite what a lot of people think. Challenging is an utterly important part of the scientific method, as we know. And I find that if you challenge someone because you're not too sure, and sometimes it can be completely innocent, could I get a bit more information? Could I get some of the evidence of the claim you've just said? And you're sort of 50-50 on authentic. The way they respond usually tells you everything you need to know about them and their model. And I think that was on that pseudoscience table as well. Picking up on something that Andrew Hill's just said, talking about sort of, does he feel that we, and it's one of the things we were going to talk about, does he feel that we, as a profession, as a group, have good enough understanding of sort of how to appraise evidence? And it kind of brings us on to that 3rd group. So we've got the group that ignore the evidence, we've got the group that cherry pick and, you know, to suit their favour, and then we've got the other group that, or maybe the group that ignore it because they're scared of it, because they don't understand it, or the people that then do go into it, you know, don't understand it well enough to sort of interpret it. We've got problems with access. We know this. People leave university, and depending on where they work, they may or may not have access to papers, so they're reading just abstracts. There just seems to be so many hurdles. What do you think the big wins are for us as a profession moving forward here?
There's a lot there. There's a few questions there. I'll talk about something that I think is something that we've lost, and that is, I think we've lost the war in terms of exposing people to good information. There was a time when you had your students for 3 years at university, you could give them good stuff there, and then you could control the conferences, you could control what input they had there, and although there were the quacks and the charlatans that tried to put it out, they were limited in their scope. To a degree, we managed to control the information that people had. We managed to keep the bad stuff, the poison, out of the system. I hate to say that's a war we've lost. There is more bad science now available than good science. And I think this is where the battleground has to shift. We can no longer fight this war in terms of who, you know, the best stuff, the front stuff at the front. We can no longer win it by achieving so much and having so much great stuff that, you know, people will realize it's self-evidently brilliant. What we have to do now is train everybody to be the critical author. We all have to be our own peer reviewers. The concept of a peer review journal is a great one. It's the idea that we don't allow a bad study to be published. If a study is obviously gross, it's picked up at that stage. There is so much now that is published that isn't good and shouldn't be. Mostly in non-peer review journals, but occasionally you get a few sneak through in peer review journals as well. What we now have to do is teach everybody to be their own critical thinkers, to get them all to filter the information at the point that it gets to them. That's really important, and I think one of the obstacles we have there is that people think it's hard, and it's really not hard. All you've got to do is question everything. I'm going to embarrass Sarah Byrne. She was on earlier, and she said she had a little voice inside of her. Every time she said something about biomechanics, there was a little voice that said, "Is that still true?" And she said it like it was a bad thing. It's a brilliant thing. We all need that voice. Socrates described that as his demon, which was a voice inside his head that challenged everything he thought and never told him what to do, but only told him what not to do. That's what we need to instill in people, the idea that they can't accept what they read as necessarily true, that they have to be critical and skeptical about everything. It's the April the 1st effect. April the 1st, April Fool's Day, there's always one article in every publication which is dodgy. And you read the journal in April looking for the dodgy study, the Professor S. Cargo that discovered that snail slime cure verrucas, that sort of thing, the study that showed that propanol caused regrowth in nail surgery patients 10 years on. You read it with that filter in place. That's how we need to be doing it all the time.
Yeah, I think I read something online along that theme, which essentially said, you know, from up until midday on April the 1st, you just don't believe anything anyone says to you. You text you get from your friends, even things on BBC News now, that everyone's a bit of a joker now. Up until midday, you just look at everything and question it. And it's like, why do we only do that for the first half of one day of the year? That's exactly the way to behave 365.
Absolutely, especially on the internet.
Yeah. Well, coming on to the next question, actually, which we may as well, because we've touched on the internet. I know in one of Ben Goldacre's books, it's a bit old now, so I don't know if the stats are still valid, but he mentioned that 50% of all news via media outlets is usually attached or linked in some way to healthcare. And this is big for us because we have our patients coming in and they've seen something on the news or they've seen something online, and it isn't necessarily a book or a tweet. It can be something sort of trustworthy, like BBC, for example. So we need to have the skills to meet these people in clinic, without kind of going, oh, I'm not sure. We need to have those skills. Is social media helping us here or harming us? Because when I consider social media, oh yeah, that's good. Well, we got it on there. Okay, yeah, nice. When I consider social media, I talk about some of the hurdles that we've just mentioned, i.e. access to journals, not having the ability to understand it. What I know Emma Cowley refers to and Kylie Williams refer to as sort of research translation, something they're very passionate about doing, and something Craig and I, one of the sort of reasons we do this kind of stuff. So we've got the internet that now says, okay, smarter people than us can read something, write a blog about it. We can go and read the blog, and that's a great way of sort of disseminating information. It breaks down some of those hurdles. Or you can send someone a message on Twitter and say, oh, I actually can't get that journal, and within a few minutes the PDFs popped into your inbox. So clearly social media helps break down some of those hurdles, but at the same time it feels like it gives that vehicle for everyone, as we said, when we were offline. As soon as you've got a laptop and a login, you can be an expert overnight. You can frame yourself an expert overnight. So do we think that bad science and pseudoscience and all of this is worse than it's ever been? Do we think that the social media is facilitating this kind of explosion of it? Or do you think it's always been this bad, but because of social media, we're just finding it more easily?
I think it's worse. First of all, bad ideas spread quicker than good ideas. A lie can run around the block before the truth has got his shoes laced up. Also, there is a we are late to the party. Our side, if you like, is late to the party. Bad scientists, salesmen, marketers, all these people that we don't like, have been much quicker on the uptake in terms of how to get their stuff out there than we on the scientific side have been at getting out the counter arguments. And that again, I mean, again, to come back to the American political situation, because it's so fascinating, you can see it there. The Republicans, the Trump campaign got very quickly onto this bandwagon of how to convince people of shit that wasn't true. And the Democrats broadly took the high ground and just sort of stuck to the traditional outlets, and look what happened. This is what's happening with bad science. We are slowly recovering the balance. And that is, I think, why what this podcast is doing, what people like we do, what people rather snarkily call the evidence police is so important, because we cannot cede that ground. We have to have people that when somebody says, miracle insole B cures everything, somebody is going to be up there to say, no, it isn't. We can't wait for the 5 years later peer review study into miracle insole B that proves that it doesn't work. We have to be there to ask the questions then and there. We have to be on it. It's an uphill struggle, but yeah, I think overall it's been a bad thing. Overall, I think it's had a negative effect. It doesn't need to, but it comes back to, it can't be done by the few at the top. We can no longer rely on the people in the universities, the people that the peer reviewers at the studies of the journals to do it for us. We all have to be out there, not even arguing, asking. And this is the thing. I mean, you alluded to the behaviours of people when challenged, and that is absolutely key. If you want to find out if a model is good or not, ask some questions, and as much as listening to the answers, look at the way the person approaches your question. Because somebody who's got a good sound argument will respond in a certain way. They will engage with it, they will be interested in it, and if you find a flaw in their argument, they will want to hear it, they will want to know it, because they want to know what is true. They're looking for what is true. The other sort of person will first of all try and engage with it, and then when you don't accept the answer immediately, they will start getting angry, they will start throwing ad hominems, they will attack you personally for asking the questions, they will call you a bully or a bull even. They will behave in a very predictable and preset pattern that we've seen a million times before, and then in the end they will flounce. You will get the I'm not staying around here to be spoken to like this in this tone of voice. I'm taking my toys and going. That's not the behavior of somebody who is holding a nugget of new knowledge. People with good models, people with good science like to be challenged because they want to be. I'm going to embarrass somebody else. I'm going to embarrass Ian Linane, who you had on. Great guy. God love him. He is pushing the outside boundaries of what we know. He is pushing some new stuff. He will regularly email me stuff and say, Rob, what do you think? Now, I'm the most cynical, unpleasant person in the world, but he actually actively seeks out criticism from me. That tells you something about his motivations. That's somebody who wears a hair shirt on the inside. The people who don't enjoy criticism, the people that don't want to have their ideas challenged, they're the ones you've got to watch.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think you're bang on. I've been on the end of several ad hominems over the years.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, I know. I'm incredibly sensitive. Every single one of them. Genuine. No. Really? I mean this. I genuinely mean this. Every single one of them, I just take 3 or 4 minutes just to go, oh, maybe I am a bit of a dick. You know, it gets to you after a while.
It doesn't mean you're wrong.
Well, yeah, a scientific one at least. Let's talk about logical fallacies, which we're all guilty of. Yeah, they're all around us. Some of the things we do on a daily basis are probably logical fallacies we didn't even know about. But you know, on any given day, we see them with our patients. We sometimes catch ourselves doing them, whether it be false dichotomies or sharpshooter fallacies or you know, whatever it may be. what are your top three? If you sort of said to someone who wasn't even aware what a logical fallacy was, go and learn about these three, and I think over the course of the next few weeks in clinic, you'll spot them, and these are probably the three to commit to memory, to really sort of get a head start on your patients, on your interactions on the fora online. What are the big three for you that you think people should be aware of?
Oh, that's a good question. In terms of learning them, a good place to start, if you Google, in fact, we'll put it up as a link. There's the page that's got the whole list of them with a little cartoon at the front. We'll throw that up later on. I would say the number one to be aware of when you look at what people post is the endowment fallacy, the endowment effect, which is that you judge with increased validity something that you own. If I ask you how much your car costs, you will judge it as higher because it's your car. If I ask you about your belief system, you will judge it as higher because it's your belief system. So you've got to be aware that anytime anybody, including you, is talking about any kind of scientific model or belief, if it is their baby, if they've built it, they will be less able to critique it. There you go. That's the one. Critical thinking cards. Second most. I would say.
Let me go on.
Okay. Something that I don't know if it counts as a formal logical fallacy, but there's a concept I've come across quite recently called cognitive ease, which is how pleasant or easy it is to contemplate something. And the idea is that if it's something we're familiar with, we are inherently comfortable with it. Anything that is unfamiliar, anything that causes you to pay attention to it, requires what's called cognitive strain. It's from a book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And the idea is that the slow thinking, the analytical thinking, causes an inherent and unpleasant cognitive strain, whereas the something that you're familiar with, something that you've come across before, you get this cognitive ease thing. And what that means is that we're all inherently resistant to learning new stuff. People don't like news, they like olds. You would imagine that when the internet came along, that when we were suddenly exposed to all this new knowledge, this whole universe of knowledge that we never had access to 20 years ago, that it would have resulted in more truth. It would have resulted in a broader understanding of the universe, that we would have all been happy to accept it. I think it's had the opposite effect. You open people up to all this vast, scary knowledge, and everything they read, they have to think about. We've lamented before the fact that people don't like to analyze new stuff. They don't like to think about new stuff. I think what's happened is people have sort of almost clammed up. They've almost withdrawn into, I just want to know. Can somebody with biomechanics just give me the simple answer? Can somebody just tell me what to do? What prefab should I be using? Because it's scary. Asking questions is scary. And so then you have somebody that comes along and says, yeah, I can give you that. I can give you one model that will cover everything. I can give you one series of tests, one assessment protocol that will answer all of your questions. It will cover all of that horrible uncertainty, all of those patients that you don't know how to help. If you just do this, it will all make sense. And then they do the course, and it does. It's all there. It's all contained. And once you've learned this single, contained, hermetically sealed model, you have no need to go out and experience that horrible cognitive strain of learning new stuff. So that would be the second one for me, the fact that learning new stuff, challenging your beliefs, is inherently unpleasant, and recognizing that will help you to realize why it's difficult for you.
Actually, just on that, Robert, there was a comment. There was a comment earlier on. I'm just scrolling down to find it. Read biomechanics at university. I want my money back. but that fits nicely in with it. Yeah, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, we want the simple answers. We want the smooth, contained. We just want it to be simple. We just want to learn this. And the truth is, reality is not like that.
Yeah.
Reality is messy and complex and multifactorial, and it's got a huge amount of built-in uncertainty in it.
Well, I've got to stand up in a conference on Friday and tell 150 people that orthoses don't realign the calcaneus. So,
God, are we still having that fight?
Pray for me. Pray for me.
So help him, Lord Jesus.
My two favourite, just while I get, because I know I put you on the spot a bit there. So while you're thinking about number 3, the two I think that we see, Craig and I see an awful lot, and we've talked about, is obviously the appeal to nature.
Yeah. Oh, Christ.
We saw it.
Natural fallacies.
Utterly prevalent when this is the reason barefoot running is best. I know I've spoken to Belinda, and the terminology is pretty bad.
I think they have it worse.
Something's natural. It must be. And also the straw man argument, where someone sort of takes your position and sort of dresses it up,
mutates it very slightly,
and then attacks that position. So I think all these things are things that we all see. We just don't necessarily give them their titles.
It's worth knowing.
Bruce just mentioned. So I was just saying, Bruce just mentioned a book, and actually it reminds me, I glanced down at my laptop here and I saw 10, 15 minutes ago a question from Toby, I think it was, saying, where should someone start? I mean, we talked about where should, what reference should someone go to if they really want to kind of open their minds. At the very top of this episode, we talked about Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, pretty much the reason we named this chat what it is, and I think that's not a terrible place to start.
No, I'd agree. I love that book because it popularizes it. It does what the other side does. It makes it accessible, it makes it interesting, it makes it fun. You can get it on Audible. It's as an audio book. Listen to it in the car. If you do a lot of commuting, over a fortnight, you'll hear the whole thing in convenient 20-minute chunks. That would certainly be a good place. So I think if I was going to go number 3, it would be confirmation bias.
Yeah, that would be my number one.
Absolute.
That would be my number 1.
Okay. If you are looking for something, you're going to find it. We see this in glorious Technicolor with overpronation. Pronation is
what was the deal? What was the deal of you coming on?
There wasn't mentioned anybody by name because you guys don't want to be sued. Is that not?
What was the second deal?
Overpronation. And it's dead simple. They taught us, I learned at school, pronation causes pathology. So everyone comes in with a pathology, I pronate, they're pronating. Their pronation causes pathology. It's it in a nutshell. Almost everyone pronates. Everyone who doesn't pronate has almost certainly got them. So you might say having head causes plantar fasciitis, because there's 1,000 people that came in with plantar fasciitis, and do you know what? They all had a head. That's what confirmation bias is. You look for something, you find it, and then you form the link.
Yeah. Just backtracking a little bit, I'll just share my screen. The comment about where to start. There's this book that's due out later this year that I'm going to, I know, I follow Steve Novella a lot. I know a lot about his work. The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It's a weekly podcast that is well worth listening to and gets into all of this. And this is their book that they have written that is actually getting quite a bit of mileage. So I've pre-ordered my copy, but I suspect that it would be a good place to start if anyone really wants to get into it. But listening to these guys' weekly podcast is well worth it as well.
You do it on your runs.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, I know Steve Novella. He's got a very good, interesting blog, and he writes quite regularly about that. Yeah.
Something else I'd like to talk about, because I'm aware of the time. A group that we talked about before the thing started is those who like research and read research but don't read it right. And the bumper sticker here is that meta-analysis on heel pain, which came out quite recently. And it was a perfectly reasonable meta-analysis based on perfectly good research. The research is on prefabs versus custom orthoses for plantar heel pain. It was a very noble study, area for study, and it's like most studies, it zeroes down into a very specific area. It excludes all the other variables and just zeroes down into one tiny spot to find out what it is. And that meta-analysis was released, which said quite rightly that most of the studies showed no difference between custom insoles, prefab insoles for plantar heel pain, which is a correct assertion as far as it goes. And that study came out, and I knew about it because I went on social media the next day and I read the article in, was it Reuters?
Yeah.
And I went on Twitter and a few other. It was like somebody had left the gate open on the twat farm. It was everybody with half an understanding and a quarter of a view. And it was, you were hearing, you know, this proves that custom insoles don't work. This proves that custom insoles are no better. No, the point of that kind of research is to give you a microscopic view on one particular question. It's not to inform how your whole clinical practice could work. You look at the inclusion criteria for the meta-analysis was more or less plantar heel pain. They weren't making an effort, because that's not what the study was about, to distinguish between, was it caused by osteitis, was it caused by bursitis, was it insertional plantar fasciopathy, was it non-insertional, was it plantar fasciosis, was it plantar fasciitis? That's not what the study was about. So plantar heel pain is not a diagnosis, it's a fucking postcode. It's an area of the body in which you can have pain. And then it looked at the insoles, and it's comparing prefabs and customs.
Yeah.
What if I say to you, I've got a custom insole in my hand? What does that tell you about that insole? Does it tell you if it's hard or soft?
Yeah, I know. But interestingly, I don't think the Reuters press release and subsequent what happened, that was actually the worst of it. The worst bit I saw of that, and it goes back to what we're talking about, how bad social media has made things. People were posting the press release or the study on Twitter or Facebook, you know, orthotics don't work, but use this treatment. Well, yeah, and there's less evidence for their treatment. You know, like it was. I thought that was the worst of it, that they were somehow using this meta-analysis.
You see that absolutely consistently with this sort of person. They say, don't listen to the science. The scientists are they're all big pharma shills. They're, you know, don't believe the science, don't believe the studies. The studies are all screwed. The statistics are all biased, right up until the point where there's a study that supports their view. Yeah. At which point suddenly they are the biggest cheerleaders for this wonderful study that you should absolutely read, and that proves unequivocally that that's the case.
Yeah, but
well, I think for me, there was a deeper level of fascination here in that this came out. This review is in the one you're referring to, Rob, in the BJSM, and it's a systematic review and meta-analysis. That's the first thing to say. So it's level 1 evidence. And having been a part of a group that have done a couple of these, I have to say the biggest ball I've ever encountered. So I've got massive respect for anyone that does one. That's the first thing to say. But what they are is a big review of a body of an area of research. So the outcome is only as good as the income. You know, the papers that are in it, and we know that foot orthosis research has limitations. We won't go into those just yet. But the thing for me was that this one came out and concluded off the back of its meta-analysis that, you know, orthoses were not appropriate. That's me paraphrasing. And I think that the biggest thing for me was within the previous 6 months, in the exact same journal, as I know you know, the guys from La Trobe, led by Glenn Whitaker, had done the exact same systematic review, the exact same one, and they had come up with a different conclusion. And that one seems to have. That one didn't get the headlines that this second one got.
They didn't put out a press. They didn't put out a press release. You know?
No, because they're scientists. You know, so why would they? But the key thing
this is where we're slow to the party. We don't do that.
So, but the next question is, why? There's one question here that I think is reasonable, which is why does the editor of any journal publish 2 systematic reviews on identical topics so close to each other? That's a reasonable question, and looking at them both and seeing that, you know, or publishing one and seeing one conclusion, 6 months later seeing the exact same one, that would normally just get turned away. We've just had that one. There's not been any new studies, but seeing a completely conflicting conclusion and then thinking, you know, there's some excitement. This is going to generate discussion.
But at least the editor did let those who did the first review publish their editorial.
Well, this is it. So they wrote the editorial, and they suggested that the main difference in conclusions is that from one of the papers that they extracted data, one of them used the VAS and the other used the health status questionnaire. So they used, and this is research, right? This is level one evidence.
But doesn't that show you how you can bias systematic reviews and meta-analysis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where, as I say, this is where we can't rely on peer reviewers. We can't rely on this stuff to tell us what to think. We all have, individually, we all have to be able to read this stuff and critique it for ourselves. This is where the battleground has moved. It's no longer there. It's in each and every one of us. It's crowdsourcing, is what it is.
So how do we do it? How do we do it as a profession? If our biggest fight against this is as a profession to just be better, how do we do that?
I think we've got to engage everyone. We've got to get through to people that you don't need a PhD or an MSc or even a very good degree to be able to look at stuff critically. You just need to have the skeptical mindset, which is to ask questions. That's what skepticism is. Skepticism is not cynicism. Skepticism is not refusing to believe anything. Skepticism is when you present me with an argument, I say, okay, can I see your evidence, please? It's as simple as that. The skills involved are easy to acquire and they can be a lot of fun. We have to get it out of the ivory towers, as it were, and into everybody. That's where the fight has to happen. We have to popularize it. Everyone has to be their own investigator. That's what it is for me.
Here's something I wrote about it. Skepticism is not doubt, disbelief, or closed-mindedness. It is not being negative about every new or controversial idea. It is a process of critical thinking, reasoning, and evidence to determine the validity of a hypothesis. It is a rational and open-minded process to find a conclusion supported by the evidence. It is never used to justify a preconceived conclusion. It is never used irrationally to reject evidence based on a personal desire for only one conclusion. And I think that sums it up. But just going back to Ian's question, I actually think we need to see better leadership from the professional bodies on this, especially in social media. And Ian knows what I'm talking about. We don't want to see what we just saw a couple of days ago about one professional body tweeting some absolutely pseudoscientific nonsense. You know what I'm referring to, don't you, Ian? I won't call them out on this, but that was very disappointing to see. You know, the people we should be looking to for leadership over this, perpetuating the very myths that we're fighting, and they should be ashamed of that.
But again, if everyone is their own critic, then they will hear that from the people that they are following, and they will analyze it.
Yeah,
this is the thing. It's got to be with everybody. We've got to have it. You know, you should expect good things from your professional leaders. Yeah, but the fight has got to be individual.
Yeah, now, I know we're getting close on time, but I'm just thinking perhaps in a week or two, someone comes across this video on YouTube and they see the three of us talking about this and passing comment. And what if they might say, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for the average clinician? Now, my answer is, if you do this, you're going to be a better clinician, but I just wonder how you'd respond to that.
Yeah, you got to go out your comfort zone. You're not going to find objective truth from anyone. Anyone who comes to you and says, I know all the answers, just on that basis, they probably don't know any of the answers. You're not going to find all of it in a simple place, except the fact of uncertainty, except doubt. All the very most knowledgeable people I know are the ones who are filled with doubts. Mm-hmm. The most knowledgeable people I know are the ones who are most able to admit their areas of ignorance. And we all have to be comfortable with that. As a profession, we have to become comfortable with not understanding stuff and being honest about what we don't understand. We have to abandon this whole idea that we understand biomechanics, you know, and that it's 4-degree medial rear foot post because we measured the calcaneum. It's not that simple, but that's okay. And stop looking for something to replace that lovely certainty that we had the first year we qualified.
Sure, I hate to think how many times I've said I used to know what I was doing. You know, I mean,
I think as well, Craig, I completely agree with you that you have to behave this way if you want to be a better clinician, and you will be a better clinician if you behave this way. But it's more than that. It's when everyone does it collectively, you are a better profession. And we see so often people complaining that we're not viewed as the experts, complaining complaining that you know the physio got referred that tendinopathic Achilles or whatever it may be. But the reality is, if as an entire profession we behave in this way, then as we move forward, we are better. If we want better, we need to be better, and if we want change, we need to change. So this isn't. It's not something I think someone should even really have a decision on. This is what you have to do if you want to be a clinician in 2018. I just don't know that you get the choice anymore, do you?
You do. You absolutely get the choice. And this is the problem. We have to realise that people do have the choice. And our road is an uncomfortable road to walk. But as you say, if we want to be better, we've got to be better. It's not just about marketing and telling people how good we are. We've also got to be as good as we say we are. And all the time that you get somebody, I'll make an example up. Somebody says, you know, I've got a patient with heel pain. What should I do? And somebody else says, oh, you should give them Insole X. No assessment, no holistic view, no idea of their lifestyle,
clinical reasoning.
Yeah, all of that goes out the window. People want an easy answer to each question. We've got to be better than that.
But that's the problem. People are going to Facebook and Google for their medical advice more and more. They're more likely to get it from their mummies group on Facebook than from an evidence-based health professional, and that's where it gets scary. So now,
Sarah's just commented again. So there aren't enough hours in the day or passion for all subjects. Capital letters. I want to understand. And I think I said this to Sarah. I think it was Sarah I said this to some time ago on one of the fora, and that is like I've been doing this coming into like my 16th year, and I don't fully understand it. So I don't, don't give yourself a hard time, right?
Great. You've been doing it longer than anyone else here. Do you fully understand biomechanics?
I used to. I used to think I did.
The question has frozen him. He's in a fugue state. No, the more you do it, the more you realise you don't. But this is the concept of, and I am aware of time, of Mount Stupid. That if you draw a graph of knowledge, you qualify, and then you think you know everything, and you stand at the top of Mount Stupid, looking down on all you survey. There it is, and you fall.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, you fall off the side of Mount Stupid, down into this horrible trough of despair, and you think you don't know anything. In fact, you know a lot more than you did when you were at the top of Mount Stupid. And then there is this very, very slow increase, punctuated by these little troughs as you learn. If you want to be comfortable with knowing everything, science is not for you. That's not what science is.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we haven't mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect yet either. But that's just before we end up, that's probably worth a quick mention, because it's not that dissimilar to the Mount Stupid.
It is Mount Stupid. In fact,
explanation you just gave, isn't it?
It's an annotation of the same.
The more you know, the more you realise you don't know. So Craig's getting antsy at the time.
Another way of
always a pleasure.
Another way of looking at Dunning-Kruger is stupid people don't know they're stupid. But just
if you think you're stupid, you're probably not.
Before we finish, I think we've just got Robert wanted to get a plug-in for the Forgotten Feet. So let me just.
This is where his swear box money's been going.
Absolutely.
Some of you might have noticed Robert putting money into a coin. So every time he swears, the money was going to this group here. So I don't know whether you want to just tell us briefly what it's about, Robert.
It's a wonderful thing. It's podiatrists who volunteer, who give their time to treat homeless people. Those lovely moments where you treat somebody who really desperately needs the help and has no other way of getting it. It does that. It's set up by us. There is no overhead there. It's not going into a faceless entity where the money just disappears into a drain. And you can have a pot in your clinic. You go to a conference where they are, you can get one of these, and you get your patients put in it. You use it as a swear jar. Normal person, you know, if you put £1 in every time you swear, by the end of the year, you'll be able to buy a homeless person a pair of shoes. Give it to Toby Blandford, he'll be able to buy a homeless person a yacht. It's a really good cause, and it'd be great if people do chip into it.
Yeah,
good stuff. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks, Robert. We did just have a little technical glitch. The video did seem to freeze on Facebook momentarily, but if you missed any of the later part, it will be on YouTube. So for those of you who have just joined us, Facebook will render this video. The whole thing will be there soon. It will be on YouTube tomorrow. So thanks, Robert, so much. It's been, as per normal, the hour goes really quickly. And thanks, Ian, and we will see everyone next week.
Thank you for having me.